We are gently drifting into summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, and whereas in any other year we'd be planning for barbecues or seaside trips with family and friends and long holiday weekends with big family gatherings, instead here we are with the most that we have to look forward to as spending a little bit of time in someone else's garden at a gently respectful distance, speaking in gently louder than normal tones. But, you know, it's all good. We're getting there. I hope things are all well with you. And if nothing else, there is one constant to look forward to, because at the end of a very, very hot and sticky week here in the UK, it is absolutely throwing it down. So some things just never change. Hello there, Pickles, and welcome to episode 46 of the Knitting Vicariously podcast. My name is Caroline. I'm found more commonly on the internet as dunderknit. I'm a knitter living here in London, and if this is your first time joining us here on the podcast, a huge hello and welcome to you. I do like to give a very quick word of warning up front just to say that this is a swearing-friendly podcast. Yes, all of your favourite swear words can and are usually found here on this podcast, and if that's not something that necessarily strikes your fancy, I completely appreciate that. However, this will not be the podcast for you. Thank you so much for giving us a shot, but maybe have a look elsewhere. For those of you for whom the swearing is entirely just an acceptable way of life, if not indeed a preferred way of life, you are more than welcome here. Thank you so much for coming back, and I really do hope you're all well. Yes, as I mentioned up front, we are at the end of what has been a just fabulously sticky week here in the UK. As it happens, the temperatures that we've experienced have been probably not entirely out of keeping and possibly a little bit below what many of you will see either at this time of the year or at other times of the year, but certainly we are not particularly adept at dealing with it, as I've mentioned before. I will confess that at multiple points this week, the thought of being back in an air-conditioned office really did fill me with envy. And that being said, the room that I sit in is beautifully cool for about half the day, and then partway through the day there's just this moment when it goes from being this is lovely and cool into this is a furnace and I hate everything. Please, will everything stop touching me? I want to get it off. Usually, and somewhat unfortunately, that does often happen at the same time as I'm in a conference call, and I don't think anyone's seen the switch happen, but it is akin to going into like Hulk mode. I don't cope with heat well. We may have discussed this previously, but here we are. So the rain that we have at the moment is entirely welcome, if perhaps a little bit, you know, kind of standard for the whole British weather fare. Lockdown continues here in the UK, although we are starting to see a return of businesses to the high street, and in the coming weeks we'll start to see a reopening of our hospitality sector as well, with the likes of pubs, hairdressers, restaurants all starting to open up. So those of us who've been desperate for a haircut, a pint and a meal outside of these four walls, not necessarily in that order, will have the opportunity to take advantage of that in the coming weeks, which is very exciting indeed. I hope all of you out there are staying safe, staying healthy. Again, I appreciate there are parts of the world where the infection rate is starting to rise again, most scarily in various parts of the US. So again, I really do hope you're all staying safe and well. And yes, that for those of you that are facing increased lockdown calls all over again, that wherever you are, that they're able to get this under control sooner rather than later. I would like to say a massive thank you to everybody who reached out with comments and feedback following the previous episode where we talked about the Black Lives Matter movement, and in particular what more we can do to support Black makers and community projects. I am delighted to say that, as I mentioned last episode, we would be taking the advertising revenue from the episode. I'd be looking to match that, and we would be making a donation to the Neighbourhood Fibre Company's Momentum Fund. That that donation has been made, and so I'm very, very pleased to say that Knitting Vicariously has contributed about $150 to that fund. So thank you to everybody who so diligently watched the adverts all the way through to the end for providing advertising revenue that we could then go on to donate. I dread to think the sorts of adverts that YouTube puts alongside a sweary knitting podcast. I suspect they're fairly diverse in and of themselves, but thank you all so much. I'm really, really pleased that we're able to make a donation to such an incredible cause. So this is usually the point at which I would refer you over to our incredible group on Ravelry. Like many podcasters, makers, and folk who've taken part in this community over the last 10 years, I have been a very, very kind of involved and enthusiastic member of the website. I've made a number of friends on there. I've joined a number of groups. It has been my first and primary destination for all kind of pattern considerations that I have when I want to find out about new designers, new yarns, have a look at different people's combinations and thoughts behind how they've gone about making certain projects, and as such it really does form the bedrock of the kind of online knitting community as a whole. You may have seen that Ravelry recently redesigned their website, and whatever you may think of the logos, the animations, the new font, the backdrops for instance, the key challenge they have at the moment is one of accessibility. If you're unfamiliar with the discussion around this topic, you can take a look at a couple of different places. There is the Ravelry accessibility hashtag over on Instagram, as well as on the Ravelry site itself. There is the For the Love of Ravelry forum and a series of topics that are underneath there. However, it's worth noting before you go onto the new site that this really centres around groups of people who have visual impairments, who are struggling with accessibility, or indeed those who suffer really kind of debilitating side effects of looking at this site at this point in time, whether it be eye strain, dizziness. There have been reports of migraines linked to looking at the site, and in some really, really severe instances there have been cases of seizures as well. So obviously this is something that we need to take incredibly seriously when it comes to really making use of the Ravelry website. The good news is that yes, you can switch back to the classic design. So if you navigate to your little avatar, your Ravatar up in the top right hand corner of the screen, there is a drop down option there to show you classic mode, which will take you back to the existing or the previous site design. But the downside is, of course, that even to get to that, you have to navigate through the new site to get to that point. And for those people who are struggling with these debilitating issues, that in and of itself presents a real challenge, and it risks their well-being. Now, there's a couple of key concerns and challenges that have arisen as a result of this. The first one from my side is I'm by no means a stranger to websites that kind of are redesigned. It is very much a kind of evolution, and I think all of us would agree that the Ravelry of old was definitely due some kind of a redesign or a kind of a revamp to make it feel a little bit more current. But why on earth would you roll this out to everybody? Now, I appreciate from having read through some of the forum topics that this was the result of some testing that had been done. They did have some beta users who were looking at the site, and they then rolled it out across everything. But I don't really understand and appreciate why this couldn't have gone down what I believe to be a fairly standard route of asking customers and users to opt into looking at the new design, to give feedback about it before then it's rolled out across the entire estate, just to give people an opportunity to present their own feedback, but also to really kind of nip some of these accessibility issues that you see in the bud. But secondly, and almost more concerningly, this is a group of people who have really gone out of their way to promote diversity and inclusion, who have sought to ban hate speech from their site and correspondingly pro-Trump support and endorsement on their site. And that is a decision, just to be very clear, that I still stand by. But in all of this, this is a group of people who have really sought to be quite progressive with their ideas, who are frankly failing in their responses back to the community when asked to look at accessibility, to treat these issues seriously, to potentially switch the model, and exactly to that previous point, allow people to opt into the site redesign and have people actively choosing it, so that when more people choose the new design over the old design, you know that you've made progress. Instead, what we have is a series of responses that seem to be really just backing away from the issue of accessibility, of the kind of debilitating experiences people are having, and instead really doubling down on the intent behind the new design and what it seeks to try and achieve. The response from the team has been incredibly disappointing. The blog posts that they've put out, the Instagram posts, they really just do gloss over the issues that people are experiencing, and they're quite frankly just ableist and disappointing in their responses. Now, as a result of that, we're starting to see designers looking for alternative places to post their patterns. We're starting to see makers ask questions around how they can get access to and download their pattern library that they've curated over, in some case, years, hundreds of patterns that are sitting on this website that now, in some instances, people may not be able to use. So this is very much not okay. At a time when huge brands are pulling away their advertising support from other social media platforms like Facebook and their limited stance on hate speech, it seems entirely bizarre that Ravelry, that's always been held up as this kind of bastion of liberal, progressive social media sites, is really just struggling to come to terms with its own duty of care to its users around accessibility. It just seems baffling to me, and as part of that, I really, really hope they get their shit together, because this is a community that has had Ravelry at its heart for so very long. I have made incredibly good friends on the site, friends that I had built up such strong connections with before we'd had a chance to meet in person. I am delighted and proud to host the Knitting Vicariously community on the site there, where we were able to bring people together that are geographically disparate and from all different walks of life, but are still able to connect through the medium of this website. And it's genuinely just devastating to people that it's been made so clear that this comes at a cost, and that some people are not able to pay this cost because it is innately debilitating. So I really do hope that Ravelry changes its policy, reverts to the older design, and puts the health of its users first. And until then, I can't, in good faith, be promoting Ravelry links across the site and be asking people to take part in our forums as usual, because the last thing I want to do is risk putting anybody in harm's way. For those of you who are continuing to use the site but feel compelled to speak up about this, the best way that I've found of doing it so far is, aside from the multiple different surveys that are apparently on offer, whether those be, kind of getting a temperature check on whether you like the logos, or whether they are a little bit more inherently around trying to uncover any issues that people have in terms of their health around the site itself, the kind of constant in all of this has been the Ravelry email address. So I will include that in the description box below should you wish to make your feelings known to the Ravelry team. So until we've got a resolution on this, it's a little bit difficult. I know that I'm not going to be hosting any make-alongs in the near future that would rely on chatter on this site, because again, in good faith, I don't feel comfortable offering that right now and excluding potentially people who would otherwise love to use the site but for whatever reason can't. Now, similarly, I know when it comes to talking about patterns and projects, Ravelry is the destination for all of these things. I do know that I want to make a little bit more use of the Instagram Knitting Vicariously hashtag again, and trust me, I know that Instagram comes with a raft of all of its own problems, but yeah, so we'll be looking to kind of make a bit more use of that. So if you are refraining from posting on Ravelry at this moment, you are more than welcome to make use of the Knitting Vicariously hashtag, and we'll seek to drive a little bit more engagement around it there. But really, until the dust settles, it's difficult to know how best to do this. I have, for this week's episode, continued to use Ravelry for my research, but I will be looking for alternatives going forward, whether that be relying on Instagram a little more heavily, whether it be relying on websites like Lovecraft's and individual designers' websites. It's difficult to know which way the dust is going to land, but if you do have any ideas of any sources of information beyond those that we've shared here previously, whether it be the BIPOC and Fibre site that we mentioned last time round as well, please do feel free to put any suggestions in the comments section below. To any of you who have experienced issues, whether it be eye strain, dizziness, whether it be migraines, or indeed anything more serious, I'm really, really sorry to hear that you've had those experiences, and I really do hope that the team see to make a change, because right now it just seems entirely ludicrous that we have a site that has been so heavily lauded for its excellent response and proactivity in being more progressive, more diverse, more inclusive, and yet seems to really be taking such a misstep on this accessibility issue. So yeah, fingers crossed we get to a swift resolution and that is one that works for everyone. In lieu of Ravelry, you will be able to find show notes in the description box below, as well as over on Instagram, where I have the Knitting Vicariously Instagram account. As usual, I will be posting links to makers and any relevant hashtags over there too. But let's get into the knitting proper, and you will be both amazed and I hope rather pleased to hear that I have no new cast-ons this week. I do unfortunately, however, have no new finished objects. I do have some things that I'm continuing to work on. I will show you those momentarily. But yes, it's been a bit of a struggle the last few weeks, partly because of the heat that I mentioned earlier on, partly because a couple of weekends ago, when I tend to get most of my knitting done at the weekends, I woke up to discover I had a massive crick in my neck. That was fun. I spent the entirety of the day gently swiveling from side to side as opposed to having any kind of horizontal movement above the shoulders. So that was delightful. Would not recommend. But as such, I've been trying to get through a couple of the things that are on my needles, and the first of those is my Morning in Engelberg sweater. I will include the designer's pattern picture here just so you are clear on what it looks like and how lovely it is. But yes, this is a sweater that I've been knitting for a good few weeks now. It is the second version of this sweater that I have knit. The first one I have shown off previously on the podcast in a gorgeous kind of bronzy gold, because it is colour, and so I decided to make a second version because I love it so very, very much. Let me hold it up so you can see how I'm getting on with it, and here we have it. So from last time round, I believe I was a little bit further up the torso, but what you can hopefully see here is I am just about done on this bad boy. I did have a hope and a suspicion that I might actually have this finished to show you this week, but there was not a chance in hell that I was going to wear it because that would be madness. So you can see here that I am just down to the, I'm going to say almost the last set of sort of cables that I'm looking to do. I will show off my little progress keeper here just so you can enjoy it. Here we are. This is my little unicorn progress keeper with its little gold horn, and this is of course by the wonderful Hannah, who is the Corner of Craft. She hand beads all these beautiful little progress keepers, and they make my heart very happy, not only because it's adorably cute, but also because it means I can keep my wits about me when it comes to working out which cable row I am working on at any given time. Yes, this little fella is very, very helpful when it comes to keeping track of cable rows. What I tend to do is I will knit the cable row, I'll get to the next round, and then as I'm going along I will put the progress keeper into that row below. So the one that I knit on the last round, so I then got a marker, so it's very easy for me to then count up how many rows I've done, so I know when the next cable row needs to take place, if any of those words in that order made any sense to you whatsoever. But yes, those of you who have watched previously will have seen I already knit the sleeves for reasons that momentarily escape me. I somehow and for some reason decided to power through the sleeves a little bit earlier, so the good news is that bit's done. The challenging news is I just need to finish off this piece. Now, I really don't have that much further to go. I am looking to get, as I say, one more set of the cables done. If I hold it up and you can see, so there's a kind of a one side and a second side. I just need to do one more of each of those, and then I'm on to the ribbing at the bottom. And I do know that with the ribbing, because everywhere else I have been very diligent, and I have done these folded sort of cuffs and neck bands. So this is the major modification I've made on the sweater. For those of you who tuned in previously, my previous version of the sweater is wonderful and I love it dearly, but the neckband sits quite wide on me. It's almost a little bit boat necked. And I wanted something that sat a little bit more snugly, so what I've done is I have knit it with a folded collar. So this is essentially where you cast on and you knit your ribbing to twice the height that you want it, and then when it comes to transitioning to the first row of the sweater, you knit your cast on row together with the bottom row of the ribbing, and that just gives this lovely squishy thick neckband. So I've done that for the neckband. I have done it on the cuffs here as well, which you may be able to see. And what that does is not only does it give a really nice finish here at the edges, but it also makes it delectably squishy. And so yeah, very much looking forward to getting that on. That does mean that, of course, that when it comes to knitting the hem of this sweater, I have a little bit longer to go. I need to knit it to double the length and then fold it back up on itself and then bind it off just on the inside there. I will also have to make sure that that bind off is really quite a stretchy one, so I'll probably go up a couple of needle sizes for my 3 needle bind off. That is how I tend to do a folded over hem. So in other words, I will this is knit for the most part on, I believe it's a 5mm needle. It is, which is a US size 8, but all of the ribbing is knit on a 4.5, which is a US size 7. So I'll transition to the US size 7, I will knit all of my ribbing, I will then get another 4.5mm or US size 7 needle, and I will pick up all of the stitches in that first row of ribbing. I will do that on the inside. So in other words, let's imagine I've done a load of ribbing. Let's imagine that ribbing is kind of up to about here. I will then take a needle and go through and pick up all of the stitches on that first round of ribbing on the inside here. And then I'll get another needle, because you can never have too many of those, probably a couple of sizes bigger. And that is the one that I'll be using to do a 3 needle bind off that sort of links all those together. I may end up doing an extra sort of loose bind off in that one, because I want to make sure that this is nice and stretchy around the bottom, that it's not going to cinch in or be too tight. Come back to me on that. I will tell you what I've done once I've done it, as opposed to telling you what I might do before I may or may not do it. That seems to make more sense somehow. But yes, really enjoying working on this sweater again. I'm knitting the same size as I did previously, which is the size 44. I think this is going to increase a little in size with blocking, so I will need to be careful about that. The fact that it is garter stitch on the front here and plain garter stitch on the back, although it is knit in the round, which means I'm knitting one row and purling the next. That means that it is more inclined to stretch a little when I block it. So I may do a little bit of kind of damp blocking or steam blocking rather than going whole hog on it. I do remember that when I blocked my previous Morning in Engelberg sweater, it grew quite a lot lengthwise, so I definitely don't want it to do that too much, but I do want it to relax a tiny bit, so I will make sure that I'm a little bit cautious with that. But yarn wise, this is Madeleine Tosh limited edition super soft DK in the Viridian colorway. This is a color that I picked up many years ago from the Madeleine Tosh website. I am conscious that looking at it here on the screen, it looks as though there is a massive difference between these two sections here, which is obviously where I will have put it onto waste yarn for the arms, and then when I would have picked it up. I have been alternating skeins, but obviously sometimes these things do occur. What I would say is take some reassurance from the fact that it is nowhere near as dramatic in person as it looks to be here on the screen. It really does look fairly stark on the screen, and in person I can barely see it, and it doesn't bother me in the slightest anyway. So there we go. So that is my Morning in Engelberg sweater. I will aim to have that finished with you next time. We'll see how that goes. The other project that I've been working on over the last few weeks is my Ranunculus pullover, and I will include the pattern picture and designer over here. But as I've mentioned before, don't put too much credence in this specific picture, because The pattern picture itself does not do this jumper justice at all. I would urge you, if you do want to see a little bit more kind of context or see a few more examples of this, to take a look at the Ranunculus hashtag over on Instagram, where you can get a slightly better feel for how the sweater looks and fits in person. So here we are with Ranunculus. It is very difficult to show you because it is on needles that are quite a bit smaller than its general circumference, but if I were to faff around with this a little bit and attempt to show you it properly, does that work? Can we see that? Just about. So you can see here that there is a little bit of texture, a little bit of lace in the sweater itself. You can see that I have got the arms on some scrap yarn there, and that we're knitting down the body now to round about, I would say I'm pretty much bang on waist height here. Now, it is intended to be a slightly cropped sweater. I will be knitting it ever so slightly cropped, but for me, cropped is still kind of like high hip sort of length. So we've got a couple more inches to go there, and then I think I'm going to be doing it sort of shortish sleeves. I've yet to decide whether I want to do it kind of the same length as these sleeves or potentially just below elbow. If I do make it below elbow, I know I'm going to want to taper it in a little bit. I don't want anything too baggy flapping around my elbows. But yeah, we are getting there. The yarn that I'm knitting with this, is still delectable. This is Ching Fibres Veronita in the grey colourway, because naming is a thing, and it is a combination of cashmere and silk. It is absolutely divine to work with. As I mentioned last time, it is 75% cashmere, 21% silk, and it is lace weight, so you get 300 meters for your 25 grams. Now, I am knitting this with 2 strands held together, and as with last time, I have finished the first 2 skeins. I am now on to the second 2 skeins, and if you'll excuse the rustling for a second, oops, and the slight entanglement that I appear to have got myself into here. One moment please. You can see how much of those 2 skeins are left. You can also see that I've got them in a Ziploc bag. This is not my new deeply unenvironmentally friendly way of storing my projects. No, this is my way of trying to stop these 2 balls of yarn rolling from absolutely fucking everything and picking up all of the dirt that you can imagine, because what I find is that because the yarn itself, because it's quite fluffy, it's slightly grabby, so when you go to pull it, you do tend to find that these are absolutely the sorts of cakes and balls that will just run riot all over the shop. So yes, having the 2 of them together in that little Ziploc bag is wonderfully helpful when it comes to kind of feeding yarn through and making sure that I am able to work this through. Now, I talked a little bit about the sizing in the previous episode. I won't go into too much detail again here, short of just to say that the sizing that is presented on the pattern page on Ravelry, and indeed the pattern itself, where there is one size for the core pattern, and then there is almost a kind of an alternative, or I hesitate to say sort of extension pack, if you want to talk in sort of video game speak. There is an additional download where you can see some more information about how to knit it in slightly larger sizes. The ease that this comes with is just fairly hefty, and so I would say do take that into account if you want it to fit with the same degree of ease as they do recommend within the pattern. Then obviously that means the sizing is going to be fairly limited. That being said, I know that for me, I'm choosing to knit it with quite a bit less ease than the pattern recommends, because that's not the fit that I'm after. It's not a fit that I think particularly flatters my body shape, but obviously your mileage may vary, so worth considering that and taking that with a pinch of salt. I am knitting this once again on my Chowgu needles. I am knitting it on, I believe these are 6mm. Yep, they are, which is a US size 10. I'm not entirely sure why I'm knitting it on a tiny circumference, given how much yarn and sort of material there is. Apparently that's just what struck my fancy at the time, and I haven't bothered to change it, so yeah, that's going well. But Yeah, second sweater on the needles. This is definitely one that I think as a summer garment will be incredibly versatile. I'm very much looking forward to wearing it. I have a tiny bit of nervousness that I may have knit the neckband, the cast on here, a little bit too tight. So that may be something that I need to faff around with later, just to try and get a little bit extra ease. I have tried this on once or twice, and it's fair to say it is a little bit snug when going over my noggin, my nose in particular. So we will have to see if that becomes something of a just clusterfuck. And as such, it may be something that I need to perhaps sequester some help in looking at how to reknit the neckband on here, because I can envisage that being a problem. But we'll see. Until then, we will live gloriously in our gentle bubble of denial and see how we get on with that. But no, really enjoying working this. It was fantastically fun to get through the textured and the lace section. I did that in a couple of days, and then just the body of the sweater, it's just taking a little bit longer because them's the breaks. That is pretty much it for what I have been working on for the last couple of weeks, but I do have a little bit of stash enhancement to show you this time round. These are actually skeins that I bought quite a bit earlier on in the year, but due to the fun and games that is currently the worldwide postage system, they've taken a little while to get to me. Now that they are here, I can love and squeeze and enjoy them in person and have the opportunity to share them with you too. Now, those of you who've been watching the podcast for a while will know that I have a deep love of Laura, who is Tiny Human Knits, based over in Canada. She was kind and delightful enough to create the dunderknit rainbow colourway, inspired by the rather colourful and somewhat ridiculous backdrop that I have here, and her self-striping sock yarns, that colourway aside, are all just splendid. She announced that she was having a little update, and so I sharpened my elbows and made sure that I got over to her Etsy site and was able to furnish myself with a few more skeins. Now, Laura does a few different things. She also offers 50-gram skeins, which, depending on how you choose to knit your stripy socks, can be absolutely perfect. So if you knit slightly shorter socks with contrast heels, toes and cuffs, or perhaps you have slightly smaller feet, or you're knitting them for children, for instance, 50 grams should be fine for you. I, unfortunately, am born with slightly larger feet, and I also like to make sure that I'm not going to have the stress and the danger run of not having enough yarn, so I did make sure that I furnished myself with a couple of her 50-gram skeins to form effectively 100-gram skein. But also it means that I can pay a little bit more dividend to my particular, you know, kind of, let's call it an idiosyncrasy rather than a small obsession of liking to have matching socks, because I'm that particular brand of special. That's me. But this colourway here that you can see is Scrappy Socks Volume 2. It is beautifully autumnal. It mixes these really pretty sort of bold autumnal colours with slightly lighter, almost pastel-y, almost speckles that are in there too. And it's just so very beautiful. So you can see here again, there's some bronzes and golds, there's some greens, there's some pinks in there. They are just really pretty. So these are her Scrappy Socks Volume 2. Naming conventions aside, I probably should have shown these ones first, for these are Scrappy Socks Volume 1. Yes, indeed. And again, you can see here that there is a bit more gold, a bit more pink, a bit more speckle, and just some more beautiful colours that are really starting to come to the fore. So these will knit up as perfect little stripes over the course of the pattern repeats. All of these skeins, I should mention, are on her sock base, which is a 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon. You get 50 grams and 200 yards of her fingering weight yarn. So yeah, just really perfect for knitting up socks. So Scrappy Socks Volume 1 as well. I was able to snag 2 skeins of what has to be one of my absolute favourite colours that she dyes, which is her Koi colourway. And this here, as you can see, is just so beautiful. So it is a sort of pale duck egg blue, almost a kind of neutral white base in places. There are blue speckles, really deep blue speckles. There's some coral reds in there too, and it is just so pretty. She has pictures on her Instagram page and her Etsy page of these colorways knit up, so you can appreciate them in person, but they're just really, really stunning colors to see in person as well. And then last but not least, I picked up one single 50-gram skein of her Scrappy Sock in Springtime colorway, which is, as one might expect from the name, a beautiful melody of springtime colours. You've got some lavenders and bluebell sort of colourways in there. You've got some more of the sort of lime green, almost like the shoots of spring starting to come through. So again, really, really pretty. And alongside those, I did snag a couple of mini skeins for contrasting heels, toes and cuffs. There is a gorgeous salmon colour up here, and then the bottom one is packing plastic on the bottom. So this lovely, vibrant kind of greenish yellow, really, really pretty. So that plus all three of these, let's see if I can do the thing of being able to hold up all of the colours at the same time. This is going to be a challenge. There we go. You can see that Laura just is immeasurably talented at dyeing up these skeins. I'm very, very much looking forward to working up some socks and knitting with these. Moving along into pattern picks, and obviously I mentioned earlier on, for those who don't want to use Ravelry right now, I will make sure that I include links to finding these patterns in alternative locations. In particular, if you do want to take a look on Instagram, if you're an Instagram user, I will make sure in the Knitting Vicariously podcast account that I include the links to the relevant maker as well as their hashtag associated with it. But the first thing to bear in mind is that for those of us who really do enjoy knitting colour work, but do indeed also hate the summer months, the first pattern that we have here is designed to really, really help us get through these difficult and slightly balmy months, because this is a pattern called Shiola by This Bird Knits. I'll include her pattern picture here so you can see. Now, while this looks like a beautiful and fairly standard colourwork yoke, albeit with short sleeves, you're thinking, yeah, but Caroline, it is still a jumper. Well, that much is true, but I will say that the original pattern was knit with linen. Yes, this is knit out of a 4-ply linen yarn, and as such is designed to be entirely seasonally appropriate, assuming that season is one that allows you to get away with wearing short sleeves and a linen top. The sizing on this is really great. It goes all the way up to a 60-inch bust and starts at around about a 35-inch chest. And similarly, as I mentioned, you've got options for colour combinations, you've got potentially options for kind of changing the length of it if you want it a little less cropped, if you want the sleeves to be a little bit longer. You could even go whole hog and knit this with wool yarn if you just really loved the look of it and wanted something that was a little bit more kind of transition season appropriate. It gives a huge amount of room for movement on this. I mentioned this was knit in linen yarn. It's a bit of a stretch, so this is knit in a linen blend yarn, so there's a bit of wool, a bit of alpaca, a bit of linen in there, but again you could choose the yarn you want to use in order to give you your desired results. So potentially even knitting with, I know there are some kind of slightly brushed cotton yarns, although I haven't found any of those that aren't too heavy. So yeah, definitely an option for you to take a look at if a summer sweater is something that you're looking to work on. And another sweater option that has the opportunity to be seasonally appropriate is the beautiful new pattern Sagittaria by Marie-Amélie Designs. It is absolutely stunning, as you can see. I will include her pattern picture here. There are a couple of different versions that she has knit up that are available for you to see over on her Instagram pages, one of which, as you can see from the pattern picture, has been knit with this beautiful kind of gradient yarn that gives the whole colour work a really, really nice and kind of different take on the piece. Once again, this is knit in a fingering weight yarn. This is actually knit with Holst Super Soft, so a really lightweight wool yarn, and it has variations that include a short sleeve version as well. Now, sizing wise, again, this is pretty great. It goes from a 35-inch bust all the way up to a 67-inch bust there as well. So really, really well sized on the inclusivity front as well. There were a lot of wells in that sentence, but never mind, we're cracking on. It is an all-over colourwork sweater, so definitely something that you could potentially get your teeth into if you were after a bit of a challenge. It is knit at quite a fine gauge, obviously given the very lightweight yarn, which is going to make it kind of, you know, a good transition piece to wear, but potentially somewhat challenging for those of you who haven't done all over colourwork before. At the same time, I would say this is a great example of something that is knit from the top down. It's knit seamlessly, so if you wanted a challenge, if you wanted to really kind of push the boat out as far as your colourwork goes, this is a great option for you. And Marie-Amélie's designs are just stunningly beautiful. She is a designer who designs both in English and in French. She's someone that I've been following for a while over on Instagram, and is just a constant source of inspiration with the beautiful designs that she produces as well as the pictures that she takes. So definitely someone who is worth a follow over there too. And of course, I have to say, as ever, a huge congratulations and well done to everyone who is ploughing on with their knitting at a time when, as I say, just keeping one's focus on anything is definitely worth a reward, because my attention span is all over the place at the moment. So I did just want to draw attention to a couple of projects that initially did appear over in our Ravelry group threads. That being said, as I say, going forward, I'll be making more use of the Knitting Vicariously hashtag over on Instagram. The first project to share with you this week is a beautiful execution of a pattern that has been just playing around in my head for the longest time. This is an incredible diaphanous raglan, which is a pattern by Jessie May Martinson. This is a project by Saz Meow over on Ravelry, and it is stunningly beautiful. It's that beautiful shade of kind of like a sort of army, slightly khaki green colourway that I adore. I love the fact that she's gone for the short sleeves with the slight ruffle on the sleeves there. Just the detail of that is really stunning, and just the fit of it is fantastic. Now, Jessie May Martinson is a wonderfully size inclusive designer, whether it be her ripple crop tops and her butt shorts that she designs, whether it be some of the other kind of racer bras that I know she has, the crop tops, the beautiful kind of bell sleeve, diaphanous v-neck, sheer v-neck. I mean, I'm just naming patterns at random. I love them all, and I desperately want to knit more of them, but this one in particular has piqued my fancy this week. So Saz Meow, congratulations on a beautiful job with a stunning, well-fitting sweater, and I really do hope that you're having an opportunity to make the most of it right now as well. The second project that I had to draw your attention to is one where just drama that screams from this picture is just incredible. We're sticking with the dramatic sleeves and the kind of just real kind of glamour and flutteriness that comes from these sleeves with the second project, because this is the Love Witch sweater by Divine Insanity over on Ravelry as well. And as you can see, the sleeves, good lord, they make a statement. This is a sweater that really is all about the sleeves. This is a sweater that's designed by Disco Stitch. Again, you can see here that it's a beautiful, well-fitting sweater on the top half, but it's really the sleeves that take the biscuit here. You have these incredible kind of flared, dramatic sleeves with a bit of lace detailing on there. They are absolutely divine. The sweater itself is knit in a DK weight yarn, so again, it's something that could be done reasonably quickly. I mean, you'll be knitting the sleeves forever, clearly, because that stitch count at the end's got to be fairly significant. But the good news is, again, this is pretty size inclusive. I believe it goes from a 30 up to about a 60-inch bust, and so again, you should be able to find something, hopefully, within that bracket that works for you. But as I say, yeah, definitely pay attention to the yardage on the sleeves, because that's going to take quite a bit of knitting. Aside from the fact that the pattern itself is incredible, I have to really call out the fact that the user here, Divine Insanity, has done such an incredible job on really just doubling down on the whole goth witch vibe and going for black and making a real statement about it, because this is stunning, and I applaud you and I hope you love it. I have already waxed lyrical about my love of Laura and tiny human knits in the stacked acquisition portion of this week's episode, but I did have to call out this pattern here because the wonderful The Wool Weaver over on Ravelry has knit up Dunderknit Rainbow into these incredible Because rainbow mitts. This is a pattern by Sun Daughter. It is a wonderful pay what you can model as well, which means that you go onto her pattern page and you pay what you choose in line with what you are able to afford, and that is a model that's gaining ground across a bunch of different designers at the moment and is something I really do applaud. But yes, as you can see, these are fabulous little fingerless mitts, perfect for the upcoming transition season, because yes, it may be the middle of summer, but I am already thinking about autumn because that is how I survive. But yes, definitely something that is worth taking a quick look at. She has partnered the beautiful sock yarn from Tiny Human Knits with some Rauma Fino PT2, I believe, just for the neutral pop that's in there as well as of course some contrasting gold yarn, because I mean, it's a Dunderknit Rainbow. It wouldn't be the same without it. So really, really beautiful job. I love these knits. They're so colourful and so fun, and definitely have me thinking about how I want to make best use of my skein of Dunderknit Rainbow, because it's almost too pretty to go on my feet, and this would be a perfect alternative. And last but not least, in the knitting podcast equivalent of the "and finally" cheer up TV story that you get at the end of the news, I wish to present to you my wonderful friend Emily and the sofa that she has knit for her cat. I have no words for this. I love that you did this, Emily. This is just tremendous. First of all, I would like to introduce you all to Sneaky, Sneakers, who is Emily's cat, who is a beautiful, beautiful model of a cat, and just the absolute prettiest cat you ever did see. But also I would love just to take a moment to talk about the sofa that Emily has deigned to knit for her cat, so that she can be the queen that we all know she is. Yes, this is the Kitty Couches Green Sofa by Candy Clayton, and there's a lot of alliteration in that, hence why I had to read it from my computer. I believe it took somewhere in the region of 8 skeins of Knit Picks Brava worsted, so it is not a small endeavour, and you know that I love you already, but this really does cement it. If anybody else wants to knit frankly frivolous and ridiculous things for their pet, I applaud you wholeheartedly. I would love it if you could tag Knitting Vicariously on there, and if this whole Knitting Vicariously like "and finally" thing becomes a segment in its own right, I for one am here for it, and I hope you are too. I would also like to draw your attention to the last phrase on Emily's project page over on Ravelry, for those of you that may not wish to look at it right now, which is, and I quote, "I may still go back and make the seat cushions and Afghan for the back, but for now our Sneaky likes it as is." I salute you, Emily. You are truly the greatest of all the cat owners. Hobbs knows no such luxury, and I suspect I'm going to get it for that. But that is pretty much it for this episode. Thank you all so much for coming back, for joining along, for, as I say, just the support that you give the podcast. It is hugely appreciated. I know that I've been a little bit quiet on Instagram and over on Ravelry for the past few weeks. That is largely just as a result of the amount of time and energy I feel like I'm pouring into just digital communication on a day-to-day basis. I am sure I am not the only one who has a little bit of kind of digital apathy starting to kick in from spending so much time confronted with screens and talking day in, day out. So apologies if I'm not quite as present there as I would otherwise be. I really do hope that changes, but in my spare time when I'm not spent talking at work colleagues, I'm quite enjoying trying to distract myself with things other than screens right now. So apologies, as I say, if I'm a little bit absent, and I look forward to that changing as the year goes on, and hopefully things start to revert to a little bit more kind of face-to-face interaction. But in the meantime, as I say, I really do hope you're all well. I hope you have the opportunity to just spend some more time with friends and family as things start to ease, or if it does indeed look as though things are starting to tighten up a little bit in your area, that passes as quickly and safely as it can do. To those of you who have been affected and are finding the changes over on Ravelry really challenging, as I say, my heart really does go out to you. I hope that with kind of continued efforts and communication towards Ravelry and making sure that their feelings are known, that they will make the right decisions in changing and reverting back to the previous design while they sort through the accessibility issues. I'm by no means standing in the way of change. I like the fact that they're looking to you know, kind of redesign, redevelop the site and change things with the times. I applaud that movement, absolutely. I just think obviously there are better ways that we could do it, and it should never be at the cost of accessibility and making this as inclusive a community as it can be. But in the meantime, I really, really do hope that you all stay well, stay healthy and stay safe. I hope that your knitting is just keeping you the most wonderful company. I hope that you have an opportunity to make the most of it. And if for whatever reason you don't, I hope you have the opportunity to knit vicariously. Keep on keeping on, and I will see you again very, very soon. Bye. Now, I am not going to lie to you, having seen Emily's incredible crocheted cat couch, I am feeling a little insecure as a fellow cat owner, and I'm really just starting to re-examine whether this is something that I should potentially be providing to my cat, because, you know, he is important to me and I do love him very dearly, but I just need to make sure that he's got something that really does, you know, fit his needs well. So I'm taking a bit of time to go around the house and just kind of check in on a few little spaces that, you know, I've created for him, and just to make sure that they're working for him and really offering the most that they possibly can, and that he's getting the most out of these spaces, because that is important to me. So, you know, for the times that he wants to sit and be cozy, there's a little kind of hung bed there where he can sit and snuggle up. It's right at the bottom of the radiator. He's able to be all warm and cozy. So, you know, he hasn't sat there for a while. That's one place. And then, you know, why have one bed when you can have two? I mean, this one's heated, for crying out loud. It's a heated pad that he can sit and warm his toasty little ass on. And then there's a nice little snuggly bed back there that he can capitalize on if he's feeling a little bit more reclusive, you know. And I mean, as you can see, neither of those are in use right now. But, you know, he does sometimes sit in, you know, this one because it's warm. And then, you know, there's this spot here with the blankets just snuggled up in the corner of this kind of desk that opens out a little bit. This is where he tends to sit if he's not feeling particularly well, or if the world is just all a bit too much for him. But, you know, he's not there right now. He hasn't sat there for a while either, come to think of it. And then there's this little step for him here that I made with some carpet so that he could, you know, scratch his little heart out and, you know, really get good use out of his claws. But he sometimes sits here too and kind of looks out the window, but, you know, that's not getting a lot of use at the moment either, come to think of it. And then there's here, which is the spot, you know, right at the top of the stairs in between the two rooms, and he's got his little cozy mat there. And oh, would you look at that? It's a little licky beaver. I mean, little licky beaver, just to, yeah, he's not here either, is he? Oh, you know, what about in here next to all the snuggly jumpers, where there's also a nice little cat bed for him to cuddle up in during like thunderstorms and fireworks and times when he doesn't want to be out in the world. Maybe he's in here. Nope. So given that myriad, that plethora of options to choose from, where does my hob sit? I mean, sure. Why not? Because yeah, you just couldn't get comfy anywhere else, could you, bud? Uh-huh. Fine. Whatever.